Welcome back. Well, the U.S. is now lifting some restrictions on chip exports to China. Three of the world's top chip designers say that they were given the green light to restore access for Beijing. The trade truce between the U.S. and China holding it will include rare earth minerals and magnet exports as well. President Trump announced a trade deal with Vietnam. Meanwhile, yesterday, it includes a 20% tariff on goods from Vietnam and a 40% shipping tariff if the products originate in another country. China reportedly on edge as it braces for more deals with the potential to shut Beijing out of discussions. Countries are, of course, scrambling to find some agreement with the White House before their July 9th reciprocal tariff pause deadline. Of course, the president put in that pause on the tariffs until July 9th. That is over next week. I'll be getting more exclusive details coming up with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He will join me at the top of the 7 a.m. hour. Don't miss that interview coming up as we await the bill and further trade deals as well. First, though, joining me now is Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow Gordon Chang. Gordon, good to see you. And, of course, we know that the last time President Trump spoke with Xi Jinping and the two sides talked about a potential partnership, what came out of it is the fact that they will both do their parts on rare earth minerals and magnets, as well as chips and removing those export caps. So this is where we are right now. Beyond that, we don't have a larger deal, but the deal most recently reached was for the two sides to give in on that. Your reaction?
Well, one of the important things is that we gave China an important concession on chip design in order to get them to stop violating their May 12th agreement to start resuming rare earth shipments to the U.S. The Chinese violated it. We had to give them an additional concession. In other words, we have given them some incentives to continue to violate trade agreements. If you step back, though, it's not so bad. And the reason is that I think President Trump is just trying to make sure that the U.S. can get those rare earths, and so we can then process ourselves, we can mine ourselves, we won't need the Chinese, and that's, I think, is an important step. So when we look at this is a truce. Both sides suffer in a sense, and we are going to have to make sure that we keep our lead in the AI race, because we've given them the ability now to get that chip design software.
Right. And that's exactly right. I mean, the president, when I was with him last week, told me that, look, if he doesn't have to use the leverage that he has, because he has lots of leverage to use against communist China, it's all the better. He'll use it when he needs to use it. But right now, if they could get along and do what they need for both sides, then he prefers that. And, you know, the U.S. is still very reliant on China. The president's trying to get American companies to bring their supply chains to America and to produce here, Gordon, but we're nowhere near where the Chinese are when it comes to producing products for the world.
Yes, and also pharmaceuticals, which we haven't talked about recently, but which are even more important than rare earths. And we need to bring that back to the U.S. as well. At the end of the first Trump administration, President Trump actually had a plan to make active pharmaceutical ingredients in the United States. We need to restart those initiatives because we can't be as vulnerable on pharmaceuticals as we are on rare earths. So that's important. And when you start to look at these new trade deals that President Trump is negotiating, really what they do is they do target China, and they make sure that the companies, the countries that we trade with are not themselves dependent on China. This Vietnam deal is really important, and so is the U.S.-UK deal that was announced in May. Both of those arrangements encourage both the UK and Vietnam not to buy components from China.
Yeah, it's a great point. The president announced this trade deal with Vietnam yesterday. It would allow U.S. goods to enter the country duty-free. I mean, we talk a lot about what Vietnam will pay, but look at what he just got done, that the U.S. products are going to enter Vietnam with no tariff. Vietnamese exports to the United States, by contrast, are going to face a 20% tariff. But, you know, on his Truth Social platform, the president declared the pact is a great deal of cooperation between our two countries. They'll pay, and we're not paying anything to have our products go into Vietnam. The Wall Street Journal is warning, quote, China is quickly eroding America's lead in the global AI race. Meanwhile, they're arguing that Beijing's large language models from DeepSeek and Alibaba are becoming more popular than ChatGPT in America, Gordon. So there's that competition that President Trump is watching and trying to get ahead of. What do you say about that?
Well, first of all, we should remember that DeepSeek is not as advanced as most people think. And the reason is that DeepSeek was trained on its large language model with ChatGPT's large language model. That is a clear violation of OpenAI's terms of service. This is intellectual property theft, and we need to start talking about it because DeepSeek is making inroads into ChatGPT's lead around the world. It's open source, DeepSeek, and so therefore a lot of countries like it, and a lot of companies like it. So this is a real competition where the Chinese are making very fast gains on us. And that's one of the reasons why this chip restriction software, lifting that is really important for China because it gives them the ability to develop their own chips, which then gives them a lead up in the AI race where they're already doing very well.
Right. And nobody here wants that. But at the same time, the U.S. needs those magnets. And they are made in China. And I'm talking about the rare earth minerals. The Communist Party was bullying companies to provide all this information before they actually got the rare earth minerals. The president stopped that with this most recent deal. But there's more to go. Now, Israel is reportedly urging China to use its economic and political sway to pressure Iran, help further rein in Iran's nuclear ambition. We are seeing reports that influence is due to China's China being Iran's largest oil consumer, purchasing 90% of its crude exports. Gordon, I spoke with President Trump about this as well the other day and questioned why it is that he's even allowing China to continue to buy Iran's oil. And he said, look, we're watching to see how Iran behaves. And if they behave like a normal, a normal player, then we'll leave it alone and they can buy the oil. Here's the president with me last week. Watch this. You waived the sanctions on the oil with regard to China. So you're allowing China to still buy the oil from Iran?
No, I didn't say that. We have the sanctions on. And if they do a job and if they can be peaceful and if they can show us they're not going to do any more harm, I would take the sanctions off and the sanctions would make a big difference. We use sanctions. You use them very carefully. Sanctions cost us a lot of money. It's not just, gee, we're going to put sanctions on. When you do sanctions, it costs a lot of money. But I would, one of the things I was thinking about doing, you start waiving them for countries like if they behave themselves like Iran, where they can sell oil and they can do the things that you want to be able to do. The sanctions are very powerful and it makes it difficult. I'm not looking to make it difficult. I want them to have a good life, but they were trying to develop a bomb. And the reason you try and develop a bomb like that is to use it.
Gordon, your reaction. President Trump says is looking quite practical in all of this.
Yes, well, the one thing we've got to remember is that Iran is close to building nuclear devices because China gave them almost everything they needed to do that, either directly or indirectly through the Dr. A.Q. Khan nuclear black market ring. So this is a war that China made almost inevitable. And we need to take that into account when we think about the oil passing through the Strait of Hormuz. So China is a combatant in the war. We have to recognize that. And, on oil sanctions, they're relevant to the Ukraine war because the January 10th Treasury Department sanctions on the Russian dark fleet are really important. If those were enforced, there would really be very little money for Russia to prosecute the war in Ukraine. So we should not only enforce them, but we should extend them. And if we do that, we can maybe end the war in Ukraine without firing a shot. Yeah, we got to do this quickly because Russia's grinding down Ukraine very fast.
Yeah, for sure. Gordon, great to talk with you. Thanks so much. Gordon Chang this morning joining us. Thank you. Quick